every moment, every decision presents you with an opportunity to change something. And even if you change little things, all those little things are going to add up.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Mark.
Hey, what's up? What's going on? Welcome to another episode of Hey Mark, the podcast where I, Mark, get to have open and authentic conversations about things like mental health and self-development, the struggles that we face, and kind of different perspectives that we gain from overcoming them. The reason I started this podcast is just to basically break the silence and kind of help people that might be suffering in silence, just to kind of have an idea maybe of who they can talk to, how to start the conversation, how to put like words to what they are feeling. And today I'm joined by Lee from No Pants, No Problem. That's where I know him from. But why do you kind of give yourself like kind of a little introduction, tell people like who you are, what you're all about, and where they can find you? And also proof that Australia is real.
So, Mark's convinced that I'm actually like Canadian with a really good Chris Hemsworth accent. But no, definitely. You probably got the furthest guy from Chris Hemsworth from Australia that you could get on your podcast. But no, Australia's definitely real. It's 7:30 Sunday morning for me. And this is like, that's been the thing that we've been chatting for ages, and it's only been now that we've been able to kind of line stuff up. As you said, No Pants, No Problems is my podcast that I started with my best mates earlier this year, 2021. And we're similar to you, similar to Mark, basically. And we want to just put our conversations out there, open up the conversation around men's mental health, because we know it's something that needs to be done a lot more. Jeff and I have been having those conversations and helping each other out for over a decade now. So as I became hyper fixated on doing as many podcasts as possible, one of those was to chat with Jeff and hopefully increase the conversation. And that's how I connected with Mark, and here we are.
Yeah, and dude, I want you to kind of discuss as well, like how did you guys come up with the name No Pants, No Problem? Because that's when I heard you say this, like kind of like the meaning behind it, I was like, okay, that's really cool. At first I was confused. I was like, what is this?
Yeah, I feel like it can confuse people, but the idea is, our little slogan that we came up with after we came up with the title was stripped back conversations for men's mental health. And the idea is Jeff and I do most of our good, deep chatting in my hot tub at home. And so the idea is that we're literally and figuratively stripping everything off to have important conversations. So the idea is that there's no pants and no inhibitions to having the conversations. We're just putting it all out there.
I like that, man, because it's like literally the visual representation of vulnerability. Like it's like I'm just here with a buddy. I'm stripped down and he's seeing what I've got going on and I'm seeing what he's got going on and we're chatting about it.
Yeah.
But in a realistic sense, like
Yeah. In all senses. And that's worked for Jeff and I. And I think we're about 20 episodes into the podcast now. And we're starting to get a bit of traction, I think. We've had a few blokes, mainly at this stage, our mates, get in touch and say how much they've enjoyed listening and how it's had an impact on them already, which is cool. We're going to have a few guests on in the new year, which will be good, and just give blokes a chance not only to tell their story, but also then for others to hear people's story. Like when we did recently, so earlier in November was International Coming Out Day. And so Jeff interviewed me about my coming out. And I know a lot of people listened to that episode and gained a really different perspective not only of me, but of the whole sexuality thing and the whole coming out thing. And so that's, I guess, the power of podcasts like ours is to be able to put those stories out there and help people gain a better understanding of either their own stories or other people's.
Yeah. And dude, well, admittedly, I got to say, I haven't actually listened to that episode yet, but I have listened to a lot of your past episodes. I've just in the last little bit, I haven't been caught up. So I got
Yeah,
to
yeah.
catch up on that. But I know like when I first found you guys, I was just listening to you pretty much. I listened to all of your episodes back to back. Like I was just painting one day and I just ripped it like for hours. I think I was like 7 hours straight. And yeah, dude, like I think that there's a lot of stuff to kind of talk about there because I really like your podcast. I like how you guys kind of are able to be funny about it. Like I feel like I kind of struggle with that sometimes in terms of kind of being serious or being funny, and I'm kind of good at both, I feel like, but I'm not really good at integrating them all the time. But I don't know if you have the advantage because of your accent and everything just sounds kind of cooler or funnier to me. I don't know if you
I
feel
think the
that
other
way.
way.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if you feel that way, but like I always hear you guys and I'm like, man, everything they say, like their slang is so much funnier. Everything they say is funnier.
I think your accent just sounds cooler. Maybe our accent sounds funnier, but everything just maybe sounds cooler with that Canadian accent that you've got.
Do we sound, I
But
got a question for you. Sorry, before we move on. Do
yeah,
we
yeah.
sound different than a lot of Americans to you? Like, does that sound different to you?
Um, to me, yes, but I know people from all around the States and Canada.
Right.
So, like, I think when early days when we chatted, we had a baseball player from Vancouver stay with us for a while. I think I was telling you, and then one of my old choir masters, he's from Toronto, but then we've also had Californian and Floridian. Is that what they're called?
I don't know. Crazy.
Baseball
That's what
players.
they're called.
Yeah, yeah, he was too. Um, yeah, so I've met and I know people from all around the States and Canada. So I could tell straight away that you were Canadian. And then when you said Vancouver, I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. He sounds exactly like Ace in terms of accent. But I think it's as people don't necessarily pay attention too much. And I reckon that's why a lot of people just think Canadians and Americans and they all sound the same. Because, like, people will often think, like, when we've been to America, my husband and I, people will think we're English because of our accent. But then a lot of people guess South African before they guess Australian. So I think there's definitely a bigger difference between an English, a South African, and an Australian accent than a Californian and a Vancouver accent.
Yeah. California, I feel like is like kind of like, and a lot of us are really baked half the time in Vancouver as well. But I
Yeah,
mean, California, I feel like they're like the more frattier version, like the more kind of like, what's up, bro? Like they're kind of slower. I don't know how to do it as well. Like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, but they're kind of, yeah, a little bit slower. I feel like we Canadians got their own little funny little words, but and even across Canada, it's like the same as Australia. Like there's different
yeah.
accents, right? So, but yeah, I think that
I
I
think the
think you're
big thing
right, man.
across Australia is different slang, and we like they almost have some different dialects, and it's a bit of like a running joke from state to state about, oh, what do you call this? Um, like people call their bathers different, or their swimming trunks different things in different states. Like even things like that. It's just really weird. Um, Potato cake is the big one that we argue about a lot. This is all just like bullshit to go into the story of
Is
how
that a
fake
hash
we are. We
brown
just make up.
potato cake? Is
No.
that
So like we have hash browns, but then like a potato cake is mashed potato battered and fried.
okay? All right, I
Yeah.
feel you. I
So
like
like
that. That's awesome.
so in Victoria we call it a potato cake, and in New South Wales they call it a potato scallop. And then I think
Oh,
somewhere
because it
calls it
looks like a scallop, right?
yeah,
Like the seafood, like a scallop. Like
yeah, no, but it's just like round, battered potato, like it's about that big.
I'm
If
just
you
yeah.
if you're listening on the podcast, not the YouTube, you won't get how big it is. Yeah, it's about that big, and it's just deep fried mashed potato, and it's delicious with lots of salt on it, of course. But yeah, we always have these little joke arguments about what those things are called, and it's weird. Like we're also similar in Australia, but then there's all these little differences.
Yeah. I think that I feel like across Canada, we all use the same words for the most part, but we just say them differently. Like there's just different like accents, like just literally different accents, right? But
Yeah,
yeah, it's so weird, man. And except for people from I feel like people from Ontario, I feel like have their own little language going. I feel like a lot of the times when I watch
yeah.
like anything on social media, I'm like, what is this guy saying in the comment section? Like, what in the world? Like, are we watching a different movie, man? What's going on? But
No, but
sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I think that I was going to bring that idea of difference onto the mental health and self development thing, and
Yeah,
like
let's jump into it.
yeah, so like that's one thing I think, and I think Jeff and I are going to do an episode on this soon about difference, and I feel like, and I think you've talked about it a couple of times with a couple of your guests about doing your own thing, and you and I have had the same conversation chatting. Um, yeah, and it's really interesting how different people approach all of these things differently.
Yeah, I feel like if I'm hearing you right, I feel like I could say for myself, like I know that like when you're saying that you want to do something different, like I know growing up, like I always had a tough time visualizing like what I wanted to do when I was older or what I wanted to even study. And I just knew in my for some reason in my like inside, I'm not even joking, and it sounds kind of corny, but like I knew that I was supposed to be something different. Like I thought I was supposed
Yeah.
to do something different. Like I was like everything that everyone's talking about sounds like I might be able to get the hang of it, or I might be able to do all right, or carry on, or just push through it. But I feel like I'm meant to do something else. Is that kind of what you're talking about, or
Yeah,
just
yeah.
feeling
And
different?
um I feel like now looking back from where I am now, back onto my younger days, I feel like I had that feeling as well. Um, and it's a real issue in like the episode, I can't remember. It's either about to come out or just came out of No Pants, No Problems. We talk about this a bit, how people seem to, like society tries to fit us into all following the same path. And I feel like there are people, and you've just said that you were one, and I feel like I was one that doesn't seem to see that path, and it doesn't seem to make sense. Um, and so I think I think that's a more common thing than people realize. Is most people kind of might have had that feeling that we had when we were younger about, oh, this doesn't make sense. I don't know if I want to go and do this path. Or for me, it was just pick one thing and do it. Like I remember when I finished high school and, you have to choose what you're going to do at university. I couldn't choose, but I had to because you can't go and do 3 courses at university at once. And so I did choose, and I chose teaching, and then I did that, but I was always doing other little things. Like I was doing volunteer stuff and I was running, a little side hustle business. And now I'm out of teaching and into hospitality, but I'm still doing other things. Like I'm doing the podcasting and I'm doing, 2 or 3 other things as well. And so I think that feeling of difference is something that's more common than we think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it for myself as well, like something I've been thinking a lot about this year, and it's still something I'm still trying to figure out, is like a kind of a sense of identity. I feel like, or to better define the word identity, if that makes sense, because I
Yeah,
feel like um we kind of get put into certain boxes as well in society, like kind of in terms of like however people want to kind of differentiate themselves from someone else, like we kind of get told that that's like a part of our identity. And I know, like
yeah,
for myself growing up, a lot of the time I would think about maybe different labels or identities, and I thought, like, I don't know if that's the hill I want to die on. I don't know if that's what I want to be known as. Like, I kind of had a different concept. I was trying to figure it out. And I think that I mean, in terms of, because I had a similar experience to you, except I didn't even end up going to college because I couldn't pick. I dropped out within a year. I tried to
yeah,
do
yeah.
like too many things, and I was just like, fuck this, I can't do it. But
Well, I ended up like I started uni a year and a half late because, well, I started and did like 3 weeks, and then I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do teaching. So I quit and worked at McDonald's for a year, full time. And then I was like, well, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So I went back to uni. So I was a bit the same, but even like while I was at uni, I was playing sport and on the committees of the sports clubs, and I was helping to run the community radio station. And yeah, I was always doing other things. And when you were saying about identity, I was just thinking when you asked me at the start of the episode to introduce myself and a bit what I'm about, I had about four ways I could have introduced myself. And I feel like in terms of identity, all of those things make up who I am. Like I could have introduced myself as a podcaster for like men's mental health, or a podcaster for movie reviewing, which is my other podcaster. I could have introduced myself as a cafe owner. I could have introduced myself as, whatever else. And so I think, like, I think our identity is a pretty flexible thing, and you kind of trade on the parts of your identity that are relevant to the situation. So, like, I wouldn't have introduced myself as a mental health podcaster if I'd been on a queer podcast.
yeah, or talking about your business on a TV show or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like if you were bringing me on to talk about movie reviews, I wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, no pants, no problems. This is what we're doing, or I
Yeah,
wouldn't have talked about owning a cafe.
but we can,
And
because that's so sick too.
yeah, and like it'll come up probably in our chat, but it'll be within the context of the self development and the mental health stuff. So I think it is super complex, the idea of identity and how people identify, because there's then the separation between how you identify yourself and how people identify you external to yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like with identity, it is kind of like flexible or kind of moldable. Like it's tough to, because the way I kind of look at it now is like, if you think about like what identity is, it's kind of like you said, it's a combination of like what other people think of you and like what you think of yourself, right? And
Yeah,
so like by that definition, like if I were to write down, like if I had to grab a journal or a notepad or whatever, and I just like write down um like qualities, like maybe your traits
yeah,
that I want to kind of have, and then I just wrote down like this is literally something that I've done, like this is what I had to do to kind of figure this out. And I would write down like traits and qualities, and then things like that I could do that would be attributed to that. Because like the way
yeah,
I think of it is like, if I do these things that maybe make me feel like I'm a generous person, or maybe I'm an understanding person, or whatever I would want to be in my identity. Like if I'm doing these actions and behaviors, then I'm going to think of myself as that, and other people are going to think of me as that. So like it's essentially
Yeah.
just a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. Like
Yeah.
you can kind of enhance your identity, I feel like, that way.
Yeah. And I think the identity is still so linked to the things that you do more than the way you behave. Like I totally get and I totally agree with like these are you what you were just saying, these are the behaviors that I want people to kind of recognize me for. But I think mostly externally, people identify you like they're more likely to go, oh, that's Mark, he's a podcaster, or that's Mark, he's in construction, rather than, oh, that's Mark, he's a great bloke, or that's Mark, he's really generous. And, you could pick 10 people that know me and they'd probably identify me in four different ways. Like you know me as a podcaster, whereas, my mate that I went to uni with knows me as an ex-teacher. Um, I think we're still really quick to identify people by their job or some kind of label or title rather than their values or behaviors.
Do you think that that's better or worse, or do you think that there's any difference? Or
I think it's much shallower, um, particularly when it comes to job titles. Like I was reading a book recently, and I'll think of the name of it as we go along. And it talked about when you meet people, that one of the first questions people ask when you meet someone is, what do you do? And the answer to that is usually going to be their job. But this book, which was about chatting to people and meeting people and kind of a networking book, um, was saying that that's a risky question to ask. They were coming from it from the angle of that person might be just been sacked from their job, or they might, be unemployed at the moment. So it's a kind of insensitive question to ask. But a better question is, how do you spend your time, which is more open. But I definitely think it's shallower to identify people just from their job or some kind of external label. Um, because, like you've said, a person is more than what they do. Like you could pick 10 people that work in construction, and they're 10 totally different people.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know, and I have met a lot of tradies, and there's some that are great blokes, super helpful. A funny story. One told me to fuck off the other day when I rang him to quote something for the cafe.
awesome.
Like, yeah. Or there's our plumber who works like almost literally 24/7 to get the job done. Like, saying he's a tradie, you could either be that guy who tells someone that calls for a quote to fuck off, or you could be the guy that works 24/7. They're two totally different people. So it doesn't really tell you anything about the person other than how they spend 8 to 10 hours a day.
Yeah, I always joke with my roommate because he's a plumber and I'm a carpenter, and I always joke with him, and I say like there's always like two. It's kind of obviously a giant generalization, but I always say to him like there's two types of guys that work in construction. There's the guys that didn't want to go to college and the guys that just like building things. So that's basically it. Like it's like the guys that like love building things, they love working with their hands, they like thinking about concepts like that. And then there's guys that, drink 6 Red Bulls a day and smoke 4 packs of cigarettes. Like it's
Yeah.
like that's basically who you're looking at.
Yeah. But even then, like, that doesn't tell you much outside, like what kind of person people are. And I know, and I think you had in one of your recent episodes a similar discussion about being recognized more for like your behaviors and your values than for anything else. And I think that's what we should be leaning towards in terms of identity.
Yeah, like I agree with the current state that you've kind of set. Like I kind of agree with the setting. Like I feel like it's way more common to judge people like or even just not even judge, but just to consider their identity, like what they do. And I do this as well because like if you were to interview me and ask me to tell me like what I do, basically ask for me to describe what I do. I a lot of the times I do think at the beginning like I'm a carpenter or I work in construction or I work for a family business or I run a podcast. Like that is kind of what I think of. Like if I were to describe myself or like I'm active, like I like to work out or whatever it
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I just, the reason I have that, the reason I have like more of a view, like what you're describing in terms of like qualities or traits or characteristics, kind of like the reason I think of that is because like you, I've worked in so many different jobs. And so like I think that if I stop being a carpenter, I'm not any less Mark. I'm not any different, right? Like if
Mm.
you stop podcasting, if you stop doing anything, like you're not any less yourself. You're still 100% yourself. The same way as like if you lost an arm, you're still you. You're not
Yeah.
less you, even though you lost maybe 10% of your body mass or whatever your arm weighs. I don't know. But like I'm just saying, like you're not you're not less you. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
I think I think the I think because it is such a current state of identity being your job, it's just really weird to like go, oh, hey, I'm Mark, you know, I'm a generous person. Like that would be really, it seems a really weird way to introduce yourself. But, and it seems like a way more that other people would talk about you.
Yeah,
And so I think,
100%.
yeah, I think there's a bit of a kind of a disconnect there. And I guess there's the difference as well between what you are identified as and what you're known for. So they might be like, oh, that's Lee, he's a podcaster. But then when people talk about me, they'd say, oh, he's really, I wouldn't even know, he's really generous or he's really considerate or he's really helpful. Those things would follow on from giving a more deep explanation of who I am. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. 100%. Like it's kind of like yeah, it's difficult to kind of talk about because it's like, yeah, you wouldn't really describe yourself as those things. You wouldn't use like those traits to kind of describe yourself. So I guess at the end of your day, like you kind of do have to find, yeah, I don't know.
I actually,
It's interesting.
I don't really ask people what they do. Like, I realized last year, like, because I played baseball, and I realized of the team that I most recently played with, I probably only know 4 of the 11 people's actual jobs. Like, there's some people at the club that I've known for 10 years, and like one woman comes to mind particularly. Like, I know she works at a law firm, but that's only because I've had to email her, but I don't know what she does. Like, she's incredible and she basically ran our whole club for 10 years. And so I know that she is intelligent and I know that she is kind and generous and all of those things, but I could not tell you for the life of me what her job title is.
Right. But like you could, and there's so many things that like when you describe, it's so funny because sometimes when you're asking someone to describe someone, like you are talking about what they do or what they are
Yeah.
like or how they speak or what they look like or what they, like it's like what, like yeah, I guess maybe we got to get more specific questions because like
Well,
I feel like
I
the
just
question, like you said, is so vague. What do you
I
do?
just
What do you
don't
like?
do the I also hate the small talk thing. Like, oh, so what do you do? Is such a generic small talk question that I just don't ask it. And I think that's why I probably, of most of the, unless I've met them through work, probably 50% of the people in my life, I couldn't really tell you what their job is. Like I can tell you all sorts of things about them, but I couldn't tell you what their job is because I've just skipped over that small talk question of like, oh, so what do you do? Because I just find that shit boring.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like the same as like, it's almost like a, how's the weather? Like that's kind of like what, we grew
Yeah,
up like, that's the dumbest thing you could say, but we all say it. Like
yeah.
literally, I say it every day when I talk to people. It's like, yo, it's been
Oh,
raining a
when
lot.
when you
It's like,
work in
yeah.
hospitality, you say it 50 times a day because I just spend my day having the same conversation 100 times over.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've worked in restaurants before, and it's the exact same
Yeah,
thing. Every
yeah,
table you talk to, the exact same news stories. Everyone watched the exact
yeah,
same sports
yeah.
game. You're like, okay, man, like
And
that's so
that's
sick.
I know that's probably like sounds really ironic considering how much I just talked about the fact that I hate small talk. That like that's 90% of my job now, but it is part of the hospo thing. Um, and it's a much safer topic. Like, I'm not going to stand at the coffee machine and talk about COVID for 20 minutes with every customer. So I just talk about the weather. It's much
Yeah,
better.
yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I actually used to like that about when I worked as a server in a restaurant. I liked that a lot, like that I could kind of just my brain turned off. I didn't have to think about my problems or what was
Yeah.
going on. I just kind of got to chat with people, and I used to think like, how can I make people laugh as fast as I could? Because for me, like it was kind
Yeah.
of like I want these people to like me, and I feel like part of my, I guess this is ties back into identity as well. Like part of the thing, like I grew up like thinking like this is something that I realized in my later years. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm 26, so,
Yes.
but
They're not that late.
yeah, yeah, but like kind of looking back, like I felt like the only way I could get people to like me when I was growing up was if I could make them laugh really quick. Like I thought that I was like, okay, time's ticking. I got to make them laugh before they start to not like me. Like that's kind of the
Yeah.
way I thought as a kid. So when I was a server, when I worked in hospitality, like that was kind of the same way. I was the exact same way. I was like, I'm just going to try and make them laugh. And then if I could make them laugh, I was like, this is an awesome shift.
Yeah.
But
I definitely think humor is a huge part of connecting with people. And like you said with our podcast, Jeff and I have the balance between the serious topics and the humor, because that's how our relationship has been founded. Like we'll talk shit and we'll flick between dick jokes to suicidal thoughts. Like it's the absolute extreme in the one conversation. And so we don't exclude that from the podcast. And I think that is something that definitely helps you connect with people. Like, and some of my best mates are the people that we just sit there and then we end up just like laughing for an hour. Um, and so I think, but then, everybody has their different sense of humor. So there's difference even in that.
yeah, I definitely had a rude awakening to that as a kid. I didn't really understand that very well until the last couple of years. And now I'm able to kind of, I wouldn't say tailor my humor because I kind of, I still say similar things, but I feel like it's a little bit different now for sure. I'm a little bit more aware of who I'm speaking to or my audience, who it is, because I used to just be a little bit more offensive in many ways, man. But yeah, I like that. I like that because I have that relationship with a couple of people in my life as well, where we've kind of, and I'm not going to tell anybody else's stories, but we've, shared experiences where maybe we've seen different sides of each other that, could be a little bit more ugly than normal, right? So I think that when you are seeing your friends go through these certain things, whether it be like suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies, or like self-harm or addiction, whatever it is, like you kind of, it's not like a bonding experience, but like you kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
get to understand each other like a little bit better and understand that, like this guy is a little bit like me. Like I feel like I'm different, like kind of tying back to what you thought before. Like that's how I grew up. I kind of thought like I'm a little bit different than everybody else. Like I feel like I just kind of think differently, or I just operate on a different level, like I like not in a better way or a worse way, just different way. Like I kind of felt like I was running on a different software system. Like everyone else is on Android and I'm on Apple. Or if
Yeah, yeah.
like it didn't mesh well. Like the apps didn't mesh well. But when you kind of see someone else go through that, like you're on the same operating system at least, or you understand like where they're at, like you kind of have a better understanding.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely feel like that's a lot more common. Like we were saying before, that's a lot more common than people think. Like in terms of the mental health thing, I was really depressed like my whole teens, because, and now I know 100% that it was because I was so far in the closet for my whole teens. And, I spent my whole teens thinking I was the only one that felt like this, but that I was, also the only one that was in the closet. But then by the time I finished my first year of uni, my two best mates from high school had come out as well. And so I was like, oh shit, I wasn't the only one. And then like I went to my 10-year high school reunion, and there were two other people that came up to me and was like, oh, you asshole, you should have come out in high school. Then we could have actually talked. She was joking. But like you're not the only one that's like that. And then in chatting to more people, you realize that this mental health struggles, you're not the only one. Like one of my brothers has had serious mental health struggles, and like I didn't know that till years later. So like we were in next door bedrooms, both going through the same stuff, and neither of us knew. Um, and it's because it doesn't get talked about, and everybody kind of puts on this, not everybody, but a lot of people put on this mask of how we're expected to behave and how we're expected to interact. um, and so we have to start podcasts like this to try and open up those conversations.
100%. No, 100%. I could only imagine like if I was kind of, yeah, dealing with that. Because like just hearing you kind of talk about being so deep in the closet, like I feel like I can feel a part of that pain, man. Like I can actually like feel a part of that, and it sucks, man.
Yeah,
Like I think I can't really understand it completely, but I can think of times where I felt similar, or I kind of have this one image burned. I have an experience burned in my head that was like from when I was a little kid, which was, what I think a root of a lot of problems I deal with. And I've talked about it before, but I'll kind of give you like to make a long story short version. But basically, when I was like 9 years old, I can't remember if I was even being serious or not, but I joked about suicide with my teacher in like grade 4 or whatever. And I remember her reaction was really she was concerned. She was super concerned, and that
yeah.
was unpleasant for me to see. And I remember like I had to start going to counseling, and my parents were so concerned. The principal was concerned. My friends were wondering why I was being pulled out of class every day. And I vividly remember thinking in my head, I fucking better never say anything like that again, because this fucking destroyed my life. Like it made me
Oh
so
yeah.
self-conscious. So I know a lot of the times that hurt me because I was so scared to talk about how I was thinking or how I was feeling or what I was, wanting to do. Like I was so scared to say anything because of the reaction in the beginning. So I don't know if you had maybe a subconscious feeling like that, but that's kind of what, when you say that, that's how I feel. I feel that like that kid again. That's how I
Yeah.
feel. It's like I have this in me, but I can't say anything.
No, and I think that's, and the more I go on and the more I talk to people about it, like coming out for me was coming out as gay, and being in the closet was that. But I feel like, particularly as a teenager, everybody is holding something back. Like I was putting on this show to a certain extent to cover up things, but I think like everybody is doing that in a certain way. And whether or not it's to do with sexuality, or whether or not, like you, it's to, hide your true feelings so that you didn't get judged or didn't have to go through again what you went through. But I think so many people are keeping a part of themselves closeted away that it's hard to come out from that. And yeah, I just think the more that we open the conversations, the more people will see it in others and understand that it's actually an okay thing to talk about. It's an okay thing to feel or to be.
Yeah. And it's weird because there's all these things that we kind of think, maybe if this person knows this thing about me, like, maybe if Lee knows that I'm depressed, then he's going to think that of me all the time, or he's going to think I'm a depressed person. Like it becomes a part of my identity then,
Yeah.
So I feel like there's like that kind of feeling, but like it's not like when I found out that you're gay, like I don't think of you as a gay guy. You know what I mean? Like it's not on the forefront. Hey, believe it or not, like it's not on the forefront of my mind when I'm thinking about you. You know what I mean? Like the same way, like I'm sure that, when you think about me, you don't think, oh, that kid's depressed, or that, et cetera, whatever, X, Y, and Z. Like the things that we're fearful of people kind of attaching to our identities, I feel like don't actually happen. Like, and again, I'm not trying to assume like what you were kind of afraid of. That's just kind of the best way I could relate it to like what I went through. But
no, that's definitely a relatable thing. And I think for me, there was a part of me that was worried about that becoming my identity, because I guess, like you've said, I didn't want to be known by that label. I knew I was more than a gay guy. I was, at that point, musician, sports person, artist, all the different things that we are in high school. And a part of me didn't want to, particularly in high school, like I would have been the only guy, I would have been the gay guy in the year level. And even though literally nothing would have changed about me, I would have been the gay guy. And I guess if you had been more open about your mental health issues in high school, then you would have been, oh, that's Mark. He's got to go because he's the depressed kid. He's got to go out of class again.
yeah.
And that would have diminished everything else. It would have diminished people going, oh, that's Mark. He's hilarious. Or that's Lee. He's, the musician. Or he's, really good at whatever else. And so I think that's to go back to identity, I think that's the flip side of the labels, is that it can diminish the qualities.
Yeah. And it just kind of, it's so weird the way we think about it, man. I don't know, like, and I don't know, like I kind of had a similar experience to you, like the same way that you said you had your friend that joked with you, like, well, I wish you came out in high school, we could have talked about it. But like I had, because I kind of was like that class clown for my class, my group, my graduating class, like, through high school. And I had so many people message me when I started talking about, mental health and kind of struggles I went through growing up. And there was people that would reach out that I went to high school with that maybe I talked to like once or twice. And they're like, what the fuck? I never would have thought it was you dealing with that. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
yeah.
So I just feel like it's crazy how many times like people, like we just kind of assume, like we think that our problems are individual. We don't think that anybody else has these problems, but we kind of forget that everyone has these weird skeletons that they're all trying to kind of fake a smile for. Like we kind of, it's more common than not. Like I feel like people
100%. Yeah.
aren't hurting.
And we've found that with the people that have reached out to us after we started No Pants, is like the first two guests that we've got lined up are blokes that we've each known for years. And one of them is this, great guy, big personality, super confident. And then, like, after 2 episodes, he messaged Jeff and was like, "Oh, hey, it's so good that you guys are talking about this. I've dealt with this, and this, and it's really good to hear someone else talk about it," because Jeff is a bit similar in terms of being this big personality guy. He's the front man, and then I kind of just stand behind him.
He's got that deep ass radio voice, man.
Yeah, he does have a great voice, but he's got the big personality. He's like the most extroverted introvert that I know. And so this other guy, both Jeff and I said, we're like, oh, it's really interesting that he's messaged, because like he's a lot like Jeff, and it turns out he's a lot like Jeff internally, and a lot of the stuff he'd been keeping to himself is similar to what Jeff had been. And so, yeah, it's so much more common than people think. And we have spent all of this time thinking that we're the only one that feels this or thinks this or experiences this, but it's just not the case.
Yeah, and have you found that, like, since you guys started this podcast, like, have you found anything like kind of come to ease, like any problems kind of like, because I feel like a lot of the times I've gained so much from this experience of just being able to podcast about these things. And so like I just kind of look back and I'm really thankful for a lot of it. But like, I don't know, have you had that kind of alleviation of any pain for yourself at all, or kind of helped you think about problems differently?
A little bit. I think I'm actually starting it from a pretty good place. Like when we've started it, and for most of the last year or so, I've been in a pretty good place mentally. And anything that I have had to deal with, I'm at a point now where I have most of the tools and knowledge to be able to deal with them. So I felt more the immediate relief. Like if I've had a tough day, it's good to just sit there for an hour and talk shit and vent it out with Jeff. So I felt it more in the immediate thing. I felt a lot about the value of my experience when I hear from other people. That's what I've really felt from the podcast so far, is when someone else will message me and kind of say, "Oh, thanks for talking about that because I thought this." And so I feel like that's not only validated the fact that we have a podcast, but validated the amount of work I've done on my own mental state in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. Have you like, because yeah, that's definitely the most rewarding thing. I feel like when someone kind of reaches out and they kind of felt similarly, or they would just kind of think, they were like, "Oh, I never put words to it that way. I never like thought of it that way."
Yeah.
I was going to ask you as well, like, do you think like what was the biggest kind of like catalyst for you then, if not like the podcasting, like what was kind of the biggest catalyst to take you like from where you were hurting so much to where you are now, where like you seem a lot more kind of solidified and a lot more like kind of formidable towards like kind of adversity? Like you seem to be like in a headspace where you're a lot more healthier and happier. Like what
Yeah.
kind of shifted that, if anything?
So there was kind of two shifts. So just after high school, so kind of late high school was probably one of my lowest points. And then when I did a bit of self-analysis after high school, I realized nothing was going to change if I didn't come out. And so I came out and then was able to live more authentically that way. But then another 6 or 7 years down the track, I hit some low points again. And so, like, really, that was actually probably my lowest. Like, I've talked about my high school time being pretty low, but it was probably 10 years after high school. That was my lowest point. And I've always been pretty stubborn and kind of pushed through it, which is probably why it was 10 years after high school that I did something about it and not 5. Um, but I was kind of like, this is shit and it's still shit. And I don't want to live like this. But I didn't feel that feeling. Like, I know when a lot of people say that, they immediately jump to like that as being a suicidal ideation thing. Sorry, I just said that into my hand. A suicidal ideation thing. And my doctor did think that. So I went to him for a referral to a psychologist. And I said, look, I want to see a psychologist because I'm not happy with my life and I don't want I don't want to live like this anymore. And he wrote on my referral suicidal ideation, but that's not what it was. It was, and I've said this to guys before, when you do feel like that, you do have a choice other than taking your own life. And the choice that I made was to make the change. So I decided that I didn't want to live like that anymore. So I decided to change my life and live in a different way. So that's almost 10 years ago now that I really started on the self-awareness thing and kind of trying to gain an understanding of exactly what I was going through rather than just being like, oh, I'm depressed, this is shit, and then pushing through it or moving on with it. And so that's why I talk so much with guys and on our podcast about self-awareness, because that's really the thing that turned it around for me, is that I decided to gain a better understanding of what my issues were, what my triggers were, and from there, and with that understanding, I've been able to gain control over it and improve it. Did that answer?
Yeah, no, it did in a lot of ways. Like, I just think that because you kind of answered my question better than I was expecting. So I kind of like that a lot. Like, I think that I like personally, I was expecting like maybe just like, oh, professional help or this, but I like the way that you explained that perfectly. And that's why I didn't kind of ask any other questions. I just let you talk because I liked where you're saying the way that you weren't feeling suicidal, right? But you were kind of just like, I fucking hate how I feel. I hate this. I hate this shit. Like,
Yeah.
and I even say that sometimes about certain things in my life. Like, I say it to, my roommate, my girlfriend. I say sometimes like, I'm like, fuck this. Like, I hate this. Like, I don't like
Yeah.
this. And I just want this to change. Like, certain things like, dude, I was struggling for a couple months in a row where I was just like not sleeping well. And it was like an endless cycle of self-sabotage. And I was like, I fucking hate this. I need to
Yeah.
sleep better. I don't treat myself well. Like, there's certain things. So like, I've even felt that way about little things. I could only imagine like, but I did feel that way when I was depressed. Cause I remember saying to the second time I went to go see a doctor about, my depression, I remember saying to them, like, I will do whatever you say at this point, because I fucking hate
Yeah.
where I'm at right now. And if I could fix me, I'd be fixed. So like, I don't know what it will take, but I will do anything to not do this for the rest of my life. Like, I'm sick of this.
Yeah. And I think that's a thing that people need to probably open up to a little bit more. And in a couple of the Facebook groups that I'm in, there's a lot of blokes, and I don't want this to come across badly. There seems to be a lot of blokes that are trying to externalize that. And I'm not saying you did that when you first went to seek help, but I think there needs to be a bigger acknowledgement of change. And if you don't like something, change it. And I know that's oversimplifying, but things are able to be changed, not always a big change, or actually never a big change first up, but every moment, every decision presents you with an opportunity to change something. And even if you change little things, all those little things are going to add up. Like with your sleep example, you didn't go from getting no sleep to getting 8 hours like the next night.
Yeah,
Like it
you're
doesn't
right.
work like that. And I think a lot of people expect change to be change. Like they go, oh, my sleep's shit. And then they like want to go to the chemist and buy two things and then get home. And they're like, oh, well, now I've got 8 hours sleep every night. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
And when you're depressed, it's not like depressed, I'm going to go to the doctor, I'm going to go to the psychologist. And then like in 2 weeks, I'll be good to go.
right, right. And a lot of the time, like it's not even something that's external that would would change the way you think. I posted something on my story this morning, actually, on Instagram. It was like a
Yep.
movie clip, and it was from that movie with Chris Pratt where he's in the space. I always forget what it's called, but it's the one where
Is
he's like
that the
growing
Arrival?
potatoes. I can't remember what it's called. I think no, that's Matt
Oh,
Damon,
no,
I think.
is it? Yeah, anyway, I should probably know it because my other
Anyway,
podcast is a movie podcast. But
dude,
yeah,
it's all
keep
good.
going.
It's all good. It's like a Chris Pratt movie, and he's in space, and he's talking to like the robot bartender, and he's like, like I'm fucked. I'm stuck in space or whatever. And the robot bartender says to him, he's like, you're in a place where you don't want to be right now. And I want you to think of the place where you want to be. And I'm telling you that if you were there, you would still feel like this because you're not really, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like that's kind of the same way I think we think of, like, I went to a doctor and I was like, please just tell me what to do. Like, what do I need to do? And I remember them saying, like, it's not really that simple. And I didn't really fathom what they were saying, but it's exactly like you're saying. Like, I went somewhere and I expected the answer to be external. But I didn't really realize that it was all internal. Like you're saying, like I have a group that I chat with every Saturday morning. So like I did it like 6 hours ago. And because for me it's Saturday, but
yep.
it's but anyways, like this morning I was basically saying I'm gonna start coining the term just do something. Because at this point, like
Yeah,
whenever someone says something, like I hear my past self and it frustrates me because I'm like, just do something, like do something, like do
yep.
something, like because any little thing could help, like whether it's having a conversation like this for an hour with a good buddy of yours, or kind of going for exercise, or guess saving more money, like anything that you think inherently is a good idea is probably going to make you feel somewhat better. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, and it's maybe not going to fix all your problems, but it'll at least maybe put you in a position to get a new opportunity to create change. Or
But it's also going to change your direction. And like I always think about, and to use another movie reference in Back to the Future, in Back to the Future Part 2 is where they have that alternate 1985. And
amazing Canadian lead actor in that movie too. Wow.
oh yeah,
Good
I love it.
choice.
It's my favorite movie. Um, it's going to come up on our other podcast soon. It's that moment where Doc brings out the blackboard and he puts the X on the line and then draws the tangent. Like,
Yeah.
and it's, that's a super simplification, obviously, because it's for a movie. But like, there are so many moments in your day. And if you've watched the series Loki, it's the same thing. There's all these potential timelines that can happen based on your decisions. And the decision in Back to the Future is the decision for Marty to steal the sports almanac, which creates this whole nother universe. But you made the decision to go and see a professional. I made the decision to start working on myself. Those are both big decisions that have seriously altered the course of our lives. But you are always presented with smaller decisions about what to do, and doing nothing isn't going to change anything. So like you said, do something. And if it's something that you think leans towards something good, it's going to probably end up as something good.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the times we could be fooled by our ego for sure. But I think that a lot of the times we kind of know what we should and shouldn't be doing. And I think that a lot of the
Yep.
times when I feel like I'm at my worst, I kind of think about the things that I've done that week or that day. And I kind of think like, are these things that are kind of consistent with where I want to be? Are these consistent with what like my goals are? Well, like at every level, like not just like kind of a financial goal or a fitness goal, but like in terms of, my relationship goals or like kind of the relationship I have with my family or is this contributing to where I want to be, or is this kind of defamation towards my character or someone else's like, is this
Mm.
hurting or is it helping? Like kind of I just think that there's always, we think that there's a gray area, but I feel like there's not as much of a gray area as we think. I think we know what's good and what's right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think if you have a good understanding of where you want to be, as you obviously do, I think if people have a good understanding of where they want to be, and I've just shared on my Instagram today a quote about if you know your principles, then most of your decisions are already made for you. Because, like, and I talk about it in terms of values. If you know what your values are or your principles, or like you were saying, where you want to be, it makes all of those little decisions easier because you can just default back to, well, is this going to take me in that direction or is this going to be contrary to that? And so that's just something that kind of goes over the top of everything in terms of making those decisions and working out what you want to do.
Yeah. And so have you gone down and kind of written out like kind of like do you have like an actual formal list of like your principles or like because I was actually that was one of the things that came up in a discussion this morning was I was kind of asking about like core values or yeah, I guess you could say principles like
Yeah.
they're kind of synonymous, but I was asking like kind of people about that and what they thought or I was just thinking maybe I need to review that. Maybe I need to think about that a little bit more because I think I have a clear image of who I am and who I want to be. But now when you talk about principles, I feel like that's something that, like you said, like it kind of pre-makes your decisions. Like I feel like if you kind of know about the principles that you want to have, then when you face a situation in your life that pertains to that principle, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like I feel
Yeah.
like there's a
Yeah.
lot of times where, especially in the last couple of years, I've been very confused. Like I feel like maybe that's something I need to refresh. Do you have like a technique that you use to think about maybe your core values or principles?
I don't I don't have them formally written down yet because it's kind of something that I've only recently really gotten on board to being that overarching thing. I think for a while I've inherently done it. I have a pretty good vision of where I want to be, and I have a pretty good internal understanding of how I want to be as well. And so I think I've been doing it, but I think the next step is to formalize it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the same boat that way, man. I think
Yep.
yeah, I think there's a lot of things that I think are very obvious, but I think there's other things that we just don't really think about. Like we don't really actually, but that's why it's so important because then when we encounter those situations, we have like that little bit of like a roadmap for
Yeah,
life.
totally. Yeah, I get that.
You
I'm
got
going
to
to have
wrap
to wrap
up.
up. I'm getting
I
the
was
wind up
just
because we have to open the cafe.
I was just getting that. I was just getting that from body language, man. I was looking at the time too. I was like, dang, man, I could go on forever with you, man. I love talking to you, but
No, it's been great.
no,
It's
I
good
don't
that we
know.
finally got there.
Yeah, dude, and I'm excited for the next time as well because I'm gonna message you after this. I love this, man. But Yeah, I don't know if you've ever watched this is what I say every single time. I don't know if you've watched
Yep.
the end of
Yep.
one of my videos, but I don't do my own outros, just my own intros. So I'd love for you, man, to just kind of tell people again where they can find you. They know what you're all about by now, but just tell people like where they can find you and just leave them with a positive message. Anything that's either motivating, uplifting, or just kind of makes them laugh. Even you could tell a joke.
Yep.
Anything you like, my man. Thank you so
Uh,
much.
no worries. Thanks for having me on. So yeah, the podcast is No Pants, No Problems, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. We are at No Pants Pod, and then on Instagram we are at No Pants, No Problems Pod. So you can find us there as well as on obviously all of the podcasting platforms. We're not on the YouTube like you yet, Mark, because we were No Pants in the Spa, so we were just worried about community guidelines. So find us on the podcast platforms if you want to give us a listen as well. And I guess my main message to leave with people is to just, I feel like I'm stealing it from you because I had it in my head before we started, is just to do something. And to extend from that, it's just about understanding how much control and how much power you have over yourself, and your own direction. No one outside of you is going to determine where you end up. There will be external factors, but it's in the end your decision and your reaction to those things that's going to determine where you want to go. So if you're not in a space where you want to be, then you're the person that has the power to make that difference.
100%, man. I love that. I absolutely love that, man. Thank you so much, bro.
No
Go out
worries.
and kill it today, man. Have an amazing day at work, bro.
Great.
Have a good day, everybody that's listening to this. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good evening whenever you're listening to this. But much love and peace out. Thank you so much, Lee. I love you, buddy.
Thank you. See you later.
Peace out. Much love.